Greetings, comrades, and after a long slog through Earth's technological progress from our modern day to galactic empire, I'm finally ready to give my judgment on Terra Invicta. And honestly, after playing this game and thinking a lot about this game, it's still tough to really render a judgment on it. I'll be real with you guys, if this game wasn't produced by a developer who I really respect and I wanted to see succeed, at least in the sense of enacting their gaming vision, I wouldn't have slogged through this game so completely and understood it as thoroughly the way I did. And if I had never done that, I don't think I would have ever gone to understand its beauty. I digress though. For those of you who don't know, Terra Invicta is created by the mod team who undertook one of XCOM's greatest overhaul mods, The Long War. And while I have never played this mod on the channel, I have played it personally, and let me tell you guys, it is certainly one of the best ways to enhance your XCOM experience. And if you haven't checked it out yet, it's well worth reinstalling XCOM 2 and giving it a go. So, because of their previous work, which they largely gave away for free, I really wanted these developers to succeed. Now, I want to be very clear with you guys that this game is not XCOM. It feels more like the Hearts of Iron Millennium Dawn mod, but eventually you leave Earth and command fleets in the Cosmic Thunderdome. So I just want to be clear that if you have the expectation of looking at Terra Invicta as the next XCOM, you will not find it here. However, there is certainly inspiration from the series in this game, for sure. But before I delve into the premise of it, I want to tell you guys the reason it took me so long to review this game. And it's one of my pet peeves when sometimes people who review games, especially ones that are pretty complicated and have a lot of moving parts, simply give up and rate the game poorly because they didn't understand it or it was too complex. And while I certainly think that can be a negative against the game, how can you review a game unless you actually understand it? Unless you actually understand its systems and how they interact. So when it came to a game as complex as Terra Invicta, I wanted to make sure I thoroughly understood it before I could recommend it one way or the other. So with that in mind, I will be passing this knowledge on to you at some point in a later video, which will hopefully make the task of letting you understand it a little bit easier. So what exactly is the premise of Terra Invicta? Well, the gameplay starts in the literal modern day, well, I guess a bit in the past actually, at the end of 2022. When the game begins, at this time humanity has made contact with aliens for the first time, and you command one of the various 8 factions in the game, each with different win conditions and objectives they are seeking to fulfill. Needless to say, when you first encounter the aliens, their purpose, their direction, their origin, all of these are large unknowns. And as the commander of one of these factions, it's up to you to shape the progress of Earth's countries and eventually lead them into the stars and deal with the alien threat one way or another. When it comes to setting and story, that's about it. Most of the game's further exposition comes from when you discover more and more about the aliens threatening Earth. What is great though is that you, the player, get to craft humanity's response to this threat, and the story of our species is up to you to create. The first decision you will make though when starting up Terra Invicta is which faction you will support, and this is a very important choice, and what success in your campaign will look like. The game recommends you start off as the Resistance, whose objective is to defend Earth and defend humanity from the alien threat and resist them at all costs. Though honestly, if it's your first time, you might want to consider one of the more appeasement-minded factions, as their campaigns are actually easier. Plus, working for the aliens will save you a lot of headaches and understanding what tools they have in their toolkit to wreck your shit up. Regardless though, I honestly think you should pick whatever faction sounds coolest to you for your first playthrough, and then go from there. If you didn't enjoy yourself, pick another one for your next run. If you did enjoy yourself, but feel like your understanding of the game wasn't as thorough as it could have been, it's better to play that faction again for your second time and get a head start on what you need to accomplish. Now, let me tell you about these factions because, in my opinion, they offer quite an interesting suite of choices. We already talked about the game's foremost faction, which is the Resistance. The Resistance seeks to muster the forces and resources of Earth's countries and resist the alien threat and prevent humanity from being subjugated or destroyed by the aliens which have thrust themselves into our solar system. Simple enough. However, what if you're a person that thinks, resisting the aliens, that's fine, that's good, and whatever, but perhaps you feel that the penultimate solution just isn't far enough? If you really want to secure humanity's future, we need to obliterate the aliens, which means finding a way to get back to their home world and doing to them what they tried to do to us. If you're thinking something along those lines, then Humanity First is your go-to faction, as they seek to take the actions of the Resistance one step further and take Earth's newfound might and use it to eliminate the alien threat once and for all. Now let's say you're not really ready for a galactic martial combat of arms. Let's say you would, rather than destroy the aliens, let's say you would rather coexist with them. Well, in that case, it would be best to sign up with the Academy, as their directive is to convince the aliens by any means necessary that we are equal partners, rather than thralls or servants to be used or destroyed. That humanity deserves an equal place amongst the stars. Personally, I say this seems a bit idealistic, but if you go this route, be prepared to get your hands a little dirty because, unfortunately, these aliens don't really respect pacifism. But what say you don't care about any of that? You don't care about international affairs, aliens, geopolitical considerations, or even humanity at all, really. Your consideration is for one thing and one thing only. That's looking out for the big guy. Numero uno, yourself. If you're one of those people that has always thought to yourself, never let a good crisis go to waste, then the Institute is for you. Their goal is to increase the power, wealth, and capabilities of the Institute at the expense of whatever. The Institute doesn't care if they need to exploit humanity's governments, its people, whatever it takes to gain more power, and hopefully with enough power, you can ensure your survival. Honestly, the Institute is basically the Illuminati. Look at their symbol. They represent some shadowy organization that operates behind the scenes and exploits people for its own gain and power. Now, let's say you're one of those people that has been reading the writing on the wall for quite some time now, and understand that this dump's fucked. And now that other spacefaring civilizations are confirmed, it's about time you learn what you could from them and get off this rock and find a better place while you still can. If that's your thinking, then Project Exodus is the faction for you, as their objective is to go full Battlestar Galactica or Porian and amass a huge fleet which is not just capable for the purposes of war, but will contain civilian ships for scientific research and habitats for people to live and work and continue their lives. And then, once you've amassed this fleet, it's time to peace out and make a mad dash out of the solar system before the aliens can figure out what the hell is going on. After this review, this is the faction I'm going to be playing for my next playthrough for sure, because I love the type of story you can tell with this objective. Now, let's say you're one of those people who thinks, you know what, Neville Chamberlain did nothing wrong. He was just misunderstood. He had the right idea with that whole appeasement thing, and now it's about time someone else give it a go. If that's the way you're thinking, then the Protectorate is your faction. Their goal is to lick the boots of the aliens hard enough, hoping that they don't step on our faces with them. Appeasing them enough to maintain some modicum of independence and dignity. As you might be able to tell, I don't think particularly highly of this faction. Especially as in the campaign map, they are always very sneaky, worming their way into key governments across the world. Lastly, if you're the type of person who thinks that, hey, if he can't beat him, join him. It is better to be at the right hand of the devil than in his path. Then the servants are the faction for you. Their objective is to clear the aliens' path for domination of the Earth and make it as easy for them as possible. They don't care about maintaining any independence for humanity. They simply want to be the aliens' #1 playthings. Now that you understand the purpose and objectives behind each of these factions, you can make your choice as to which one's objectives appeal to you the most, as they will dictate the course of your campaign. Obviously, playing a campaign where you're trying to appease the aliens versus trying to destroy them is going to be quite different. Now, finally, you are ready to play the game, and I'm sure you're wondering, what exactly does the gameplay of Terra Invicta entail? Well, at the start, you will be playing the Earth stage of the game, and in this stage, your faction is still largely unknown, and the extent of the alien threat is unknown to the human population at large as well. First thing you need to do is look at the counselors that you start with, as counselors are the representatives of your faction, and they will do the dirty work for you in getting your faction recognized and gaining control over other countries. Once you've looked over your counselors and hired a couple more, the next thing you're going to want to do is pick a country to make your main base. One of the things I really love about this game is how realistically they have mapped out the capabilities and resources of the various countries in a modern day geopolitical outlook. Not only does this game completely model out every country's GDP, it models out their population, their military capabilities, and most importantly for the purposes of this game, their space program abilities. So at the start of the game, as you would imagine, the United States is the world's first and foremost producer of the resource Boost. Boost is an extremely important resource in this game, as it's the resource the game uses to measure a country's capacity to fling personnel and material into space. Also modeled in the United States is its numerous armies and naval capabilities, as well as its nuclear arsenal. However, the United States is not the only country that produces Boost. The great nation of Kazakhstan is one of the world's first and foremost producers of the resource, as it contains the infrastructure from the former Soviet Union space program. Boost is not the only thing you will need to succeed though. You will need money, scientific research, and sometimes force of arms to back yourself up on the world stage. As you would expect, the discovery of aliens changes the geopolitical outlook for everyone quite substantially. Old alliances will eventually wither away, and a new post-alien world order will be established. However, that doesn't happen overnight. Once you control a country, you now control everything about it, including where it invests its economy. So if you want to dump 100% of a country's economic output into its space program, you can do that. Just don't think the population will tolerate the lack of welfare spending forever. Now, speaking of the people, I love how this game models population and economies. Let me give you an example. Over time, the aliens will escalate their war on Earth and attempt a land-based invasion. In one of my games, the aliens landed in Central Asia and overran the majority of the countries in the region and Iran. I was playing as humanity first at the time, so obviously I couldn't let this egregious insult stand. So I declared war on the alien administration formed in the countries the aliens had now occupied. This, of course, prompted the aliens to invade the countries which my faction controlled. I had made the United States my primary base, with Mexico and Canada as subsidiary allies. So the aliens took their massive army stacks and dropped them right on Ontario, the largest province in my home country of Canada. Panicking, I sent the American army up to defend our northern brethren, to which the aliens completely eviscerated them. Panicking even more now, I decided it was time to deploy humanity's last best weapon, the nuclear bomb. Praying I would be forgiven, I gave the command to unleash a nuclear barrage at Canada. After a total of 4 nuclear missiles were launched, the alien army stood in ruins, and the safety of North America was secured. The cost, however? Well, at first actually I thought it was not that bad. I looked at the country's overall population, and only 500,000 people had died from the resulting invasion and nuclear holocaust. However, what was really gutted was the economy. The devastation had cut Canada's GDP in half instantly. This caused massive ripple effects that resulted in political turmoil, which further tanked the economy. The whole crisis took 8 years to stabilize, and once it was said and done, about 10 million people had left Canada, and the GDP had fallen from $1.2 trillion to $4 billion, a full 2/3 retraction, taking a G7 economy to one on par with Colombia. The game really makes you feel like your actions matter, and I felt like this was a realistic way of modeling what would happen if a country's main economic centers were hit by nuclear weapons. It would start a cascading series of events that would lead to some horrific economic crises and the hollowing out of most of that nation's population and economy. Despite the fact that you interact with the nations of Earth via a set of shadowy counselors, Terra Invicta does a great job making you feel the impact, and the decisions you make will have an actual effect on the Earth at large. The game, unfortunately, does little to explain to you just how logical the systems are, and how much they start to make sense once you think them through. I finally started to succeed at this game when I stopped thinking of the nations more as pawns on a geopolitical chessboard, and more as embodiments of the real-life nations themselves, and the capacities they could give me. For example, one area in the game which is highly overlooked is the Gulf states in Saudi Arabia. It makes sense. In a game about space travel, your petrol states might get overlooked. But at one point in Terra Invicta, I was really struggling to balance the budget. At first, I tried to balance the budget by seeing the game as more of a game. I bought a bunch of residential habitats on my space stations and colonized planets, and these give you a nice boost of income. Unfortunately, this only made a minor dent in the large deficit I had dug myself into. So I thought, how can I get a bunch of money quickly? And then it hit me. What do the Gulf states have lots of? Money. So I sent my agents quickly to take over Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states, which was easy because nobody cared about them. And then I went full El Presidente mode, which is using the spoils tab, which basically represents your government taking all the wealth of the country and putting it into your Swiss bank account. This move ended up working out better than I could have ever dreamed, as not only had my deficit reversed, but now I was making gigantic stacks of change, which I could then use to fund my later research projects. Conveying information and what exactly you need to do is honestly Terra Invicta's biggest weakness, and it's part of the reason that it took me so long to feel comfortable reviewing this game. The tutorials themselves are unfortunately very weak. They remind me of the Paradox tutorials, which rather treating the tutorials like a series of lessons to help you play and understand the game, they treat the tutorial like it's an interactive rule book. And they walk you through the UI, they tell you what all the resources do and what this button does and how to zoom in the map, but unfortunately all these little individual nuggets of information do little for you until you have the time and understanding to bring them all together when the picture will finally become clear. It's then that you can finally understand what to do with all these mysterious resources you're collecting and all these counselors you're shuffling around the board. It took me numerous restarts to finally grasp this game, and that is after watching loads of YouTube guides, tutorials, and other information. Couple this with the fact the game is fairly difficult, at least when you don't understand 100% what is happening. Once everything begins to click, the game definitely no longer feels as difficult as it once was, but as I alluded to before, the aliens aren't exactly pacifists, and they aren't here to play patty cakes. It's going to take every tool in your arsenal to overcome these malicious bastards. And the game, especially at the start, does a great job in making these aliens feel actually alien, in the sense that you don't understand their technologies, their capabilities. But unfortunately, while that makes sense and is exciting from a story perspective, the mystery that it builds around the aliens is detrimental from a gameplay perspective. As in my first playthrough, I got absolutely steamrolled by the aliens, and they didn't even need to land a single ship on Earth. Minor spoilers for the game, but the aliens have the capacity to control people's minds. And the game will eventually let you know this through research, but it's in a way that it's in kind of a small information blurb, which is easily missed, which is exactly what happened to me on my first time. So my first playthrough, I was humming along and everything was great. I had my nations on lockdown, public opinion was well in my favor. Then all of a sudden people started switching to the aliens. Couldn't figure out what the hell was going on. Eventually I realized my population was being mind controlled, and at this point there was nothing I could do to save it. So first playthrough done, and a good few hours right down the drain. Now second playthrough, knowing what I know, I prepared to stop the aliens from mind controlling my population. Okay, great. Then on my second playthrough, everything's going great. No one's getting mind controlled, but I fell into one of the greatest traps of this game. And you'll hear people say this all the time when they talk about Terra Invicta, which is that essentially Terra Invicta is 2 games. It is not that. You must play these quote-unquote 2 games simultaneously to succeed. You must play them side by side. And in my second playthrough, I learned that the hard way, as I was focusing on dominating the resources of Earth. And everything was going well until the aliens came from the sky again and again and again, and having complete and total aerial superiority, flew around and destroyed all my research bases and mining outposts without any resistance. The aliens then continued to send land army after land army, which I continued to destroy with nuclear weapon after nuclear weapon until I had brought on the complete destruction of Earth's environment. The reason I focus so heavily on Earth is because, again, I fell into this trap. The Terra Invicta is 2 games. A game on Earth and a game about spaceships battling out for galactic supremacy. The fact of the matter is that you must be planning for that second game from the very beginning and moving towards it from the very outset. Getting to space as soon as possible is extremely important, and developing your space economy alongside your Earth economy critical for success. And neglecting one for the other is a recipe for disaster. All in all, what happened here is I was slowly being choked out on Earth while the aliens amassed larger and larger fleets in orbit. On my third playthrough, I had finally learned the hard way that space was not to be neglected. And early on, I had claimed all the best mining spots and secretly amassed an epic flotilla lurking beyond the dark side of the moon. It was at this point that I got to finally play the best part of Terra Invicta, the space combat. I had decided on a fleet design which had a core of battleships and battle cruisers fitted with massive railgun batteries. These were then screened by smaller, fast-moving monitors which had nothing but a shit ton of heavy missiles attached to them. My hope was to lure the enemies into firing at my larger ships, while my smaller ones fired as many missiles at them as they could, so it would overwhelm their defenses. And to my great shock and delight, this proved extremely effective, as my ragtag fleet of metal tubes with missile pods welded onto them dealt a massive blow to the aliens, and from then on, we were at equal footing. The space combat is very reminiscent of Sword of the Stars, if you guys remember that game. When two fleets clash, they fight in a cube of space. Your fleets meet in real time, but your actual control over the ships is relatively limited. You get to set their formation, opening speed at the start of the battle. You can also set their stance, bounce, defensive, offensive, focus fire, etc. You get to pick their targets, and off they go. Most of the time, victory in battle is decided beforehand based on the capabilities of the ships in combat or the formations chosen by either side. This lets you enjoy watching the spectacular space battles unfurling before you, though having to get super intensive in microing your ships. Though if you do want to do more microing, you can, and this game will let you micro your ship's individual defensive maneuvers, letting you do various rolls and twists and turns to dodge incoming projectiles. Saving a ship from an intense bombardment on account of your fancy footwork is one of the most satisfying moments this game has to offer, second only to the satisfaction of watching your fleet transform over time from the equivalents of rafts with cannons strapped on them to massive futuristic battleships. Unfortunately, this part of the game is locked behind hours of gameplay, and even if you get there, there's no guarantee you will create a ship design that is effective. I felt like I was extremely likely to have thought of an effective design quickly. If I hadn't, there is a strong possibility I might have rage quit the game after my fleet was destroyed. This is why I recommend you spend some time messing around in the skirmish mode, getting a handle of the space combat before you have to actually perform in the campaign. It will save you a lot of trouble down the road and gets you into the best part of the game much quicker. All in all though, I honestly don't think I've struggled to review a game as much as Terra Invicta in a while. And that is because while I did enjoy it immensely, I am not sure if I can actually recommend it, as it has some serious drawbacks. As I've mentioned, the game does a poor job in conveying information to you, and this is a massive problem, as it makes the learning curve of the game a steep and unenjoyable climb. However, beyond that, there are some more serious problems that I have not touched on, one of which is the game's pacing. It is painfully slow. The amount of time it takes between turns can be absolutely dreadful. And beyond that, there's just the amount of time that it takes to get anything done, to researching text, to building up resources, to actually getting to the best part of the game. Everything takes longer than it needs to. Thankfully, the devs have addressed this at time of review, as they have added sliders to speed up various aspects of the game. I haven't used any of these sliders yet, as for my playthroughs, I wanted to make sure that my playthroughs for the review, I wanted to make sure were on the default version of the game. But now that I am done, you better believe I'm going to be kicking those bad boys up. And I would recommend you do too, but honestly, I'm sure after your playthrough you will anyway. Now, to a second issue which slowed the game down: performance. Terra Invicta renders our entire solar system in real time. On the one hand, this is incredible to look at, as you watch planets, asteroids, fleets, and space stations whirl around our solar system in mesmerizing real time. But this also slows the game down considerably, as rendering all these things does take a considerable amount of resources, and every time I zoom into Earth or zoom back out into space, I get substantial lag spikes. There'll be even times when the game is paused and I'll be assigning orders to my counselors and the game will be dropping frames, and even sometimes there will be a delay in assigning my counselor an action and then giving me an affirmation that they're going to go and do that. The bottom line is, listen, Terra Invicta is, in my opinion, not just a good game, but a great game. I found myself absorbed in its world and thinking about it when I'm away from my computer, planning new fleet designs and strategies. Unfortunately for the developer, I would have never learned that this was a great game if I had been playing this game for review. These days, as you guys know, I've got a lot of irons in the fire. Kids, work, YouTube videos. There's a lot going on, and I don't have the luxury of giving games the amount of time I used to. in my younger years. There's a strong possibility that if I were playing this game not just for review, I probably would have given up on it and moved on to something else, because I just can't dedicate 15 hours to a game just to learn its basics anymore. And I would never blame anybody else who felt this way. However, because I was actually playing this game for review, I couldn't give up on it until I understood it. And through this process, I learned about the game and what makes it so great. And it's how all of its systems interact together and how all the simulations come together and how you can impact it. It's almost like the devs are hiding away the best parts of the game from you. So if you're asking yourself, is Terra Invicta for me? Well, I would ask yourself how much time you're willing to put into it. Because while the learning curve is steep, and you will have to put in hours to climb it, that summit is oh so satisfying. It should be noted that Terra Invicta is still in early access, so things can change, and I hope they do, because what's here is great, and with the right amount of polish and vision, Terra Invicta can be something really special in my opinion. However, as it is, the game does need a few more tweaks and polishes to be truly great. It needs much better optimization, it needs better tutorials and ways of conveying information, and honestly, a few UI enhancements couldn't hurt either. So, at the very least, Terra Invicta's early access foundation is strong. Whether or not they will make the adequate steps to build on that foundation will remain to be seen. Now with that, I want to thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review and it gave you some insight as to whether or not this game is for you. And until next time, this is the Comrade signing off for now. And I'm going to leave you with some ASMR right now, because this space chatter from Terra Invicta is seriously phenomenal. Honestly, I could listen to this shit for hours. Anyway, till next time, you guys take care.
1202. Looks like it's clear. 1202 alarm. Yeah, the same thing we had. Flight, retro. Go retro. Throttle down. 6+25. Give us a reading on the 1202 program. We're going that flight. We're going that alarm. Roger, we got you. If it doesn't reoccur, we'll be go. Roger. Taking in adult age now. Roger. Roger. Did you get the throttle down to Capcom? 6+25. Roger. Throttle down. 6+25. Throttle down. Flight Fido converging on Delta H. Roger. 6+25. Flight control, we have velocity. Roger. That's the Earth, right out our front window.